And let's go ahead and let's quickly export default a component called conversation page like this. And all I'm going to do in the return is a div saying hello conversation like that. And now that you have this conversation route right here, you can go ahead and click on conversation either in the dashboard or in the sidebar, or manually go to /conversation and you are going to see that route right here. So you can try it from here, and from here it should be exactly the same because the href is matching. Perfect. Now what I want to do is I want to replace this text hello conversation with a heading component. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to replace this with heading like this. And now I'm going to get an error because the heading component does not exist. So let's go ahead and let's create that inside of our components folder here. Create a new file called heading.tsx like that. And in here, I'm going to export const heading like this, which is going to just return a simple div saying heading component like that. Perfect. And now that we have that, we can go back inside of our conversation page and import heading from add/components heading like this. And once I save, you can see that now it's rendering the text from that very same component. Now let's create an interface for this heading. So interface heading props like this. It's going to have a title, which is a type of a string. It's going to have a description, which is a type of string as well. It's going to have an icon, which is a type of Lucid icon from Lucid React. Now, when I did this in the first iteration of this project, I actually didn't have this import. I used icon, but for some reason now it's a Lucid icon. So if you're just having any trouble with this, you can just put any and save yourself any trouble if you're getting errors here. But for now, this seems to work. Perhaps a package has updated and changed that type, or maybe I did something wrong in the initial project. But regardless, if this is working fine for you, you can just continue like that. If you're having any problems, just replace this with any. Okay, besides icon, we're also going to have an optional icon color. So put a question mark, it's a type of string, and an optional BG color like this, which is also a type of string. Now let's go ahead and let's destructure these props. So title, description, icon, icon color, and BG color like that. And let's go ahead and assign the props, heading props like this. There we go. Beautiful. And now let's go back inside of our conversation page and let's assign these props right here so we can better see what we are developing. So the title is going to be conversation. The description is going to be our most advanced conversation model, or whatever you want really. Icon is going to be message square from Lucid React, and I'm going to separate my imports like this. Great. The icon color is going to be text-violet -500, and BG color is going to be BG-violet -500/10 like this. So nothing much should change now, but you can see that there are no errors in this component, meaning that we passed all the correct props. If you're having an error with the icon, that probably is referring to what I said before. Just replace this with any, but it seems to work fine, so you can just follow along. Now let's use these props to actually create something in this heading component. Let's go ahead and let's wrap this entire thing into a fragment first, like this. And now let's go ahead and let's give this div a class name of px-4. On large, we're going to have a bigger padding, so px-8, flex items-center, gap-x-3, and margin bottom of 8 like that. Great. Now inside of this, instead of that text, create another div with a dynamic class name. So open curly brackets and go ahead and import the CN library from our libs like that. So make sure you have that. Open parentheses. Let's give it some default classes. In my case, it's going to be W10 and H10, and pass the dynamic icon. Oh, my apologies. I wrote the wrong line. So first thing we have to do is actually the container for the icon. That was the class name for the icon. My apologies. So this is the correct class name. P-2 W-fit and rounded-MD. And the dynamic color is BG color like this. Perfect. And now inside of that, go ahead and render the icon like this. And we don't have this icon, so we have to remap this icon to a capital icon. So go into your props right here where the icon is and just remap it to icon like this. Nice. And now let's go ahead and let's give this a class name of cn like this, w-10, h-10, and icon color like this. There we go. So now you can see how that very same icon from the dashboard is here as well. That's exactly what we wanted. Beautiful. Now what I want to do is I want to go outside of this div right here. I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to create an h2 element inside with a class name of text-3xl and font-bold like that. And let's create a text rendering title like this. But we made a mistake, so I created this div outside of this main div, and what I think we want to actually do is render it inside of that. So not in the bottom of our fragment, but right here like this. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. My apologies. So I will just indent this to look as it should. And what I'm going to do inside of this div is just below the h2 element, I'm going to create a new paragraph in which we're going to render the description like this. And I'm going to add a class name here, text-sm, text-muted-foreground, like this. There we go. So now we have a nice heading component that we can reuse throughout all of these models right here. Let me just expand this so you can see exactly how this looks. And I think we actually don't need this fragment. There we go. Yeah, we don't need the fragment. So just create a div which defines our padding on both small devices and large devices. It uses flex to center the items and add some additional spacing between these items. Then we have the first div holding our icon and its background, and the second div holding the title and the description. And you can see how it looks nice on both mobile and desktop. Nice. Great. I'm just going to expand this as much as I can so we can still develop here. And now let's go back inside of our page.tsx because the heading component is finished and there's nothing more we can do here. So just below this heading component, create a new div inside of your conversation page with a class name of px-4 but an lg px-8 like this. And what you're going to render inside of here is our form, but we have no form elements yet. So what we have to do is we have to go inside of our chat-cn UI right here, and let's go ahead and find the form component right here, React hook form like this. So, whoops, I'm just going to expand it a little bit so you can see better. And let's go ahead and let's find how to install that. So we are using npx chat-cn-ui at latest add form. I'm going to copy that as npm and I'm going to go inside of my terminal right here. I will paste that and I'm going to confirm the installation like this, and it's going to install a couple of packages. So this is a bit of a larger component. So we're going to get React hook form, we're going to get all the form elements, and we're also going to get some validators. So go ahead and refresh your application if you've shut it down and just make sure it loads normally. And what we can do now is we can actually start building our form. But before we do that, let's go ahead and let's actually create some functions that the form is going to need. So const form is equal use form from React hook form, which is a new package that we now have thanks to this command that we just run. So that installed this for us. Inside of this use form, let's go ahead and let's define the default values. My apologies. Default values like this. Let's give it a prompt, which is an empty string. So we are only going to have one input, which is going to take this prompt right here. And now you see that I have an error because I'm using use form, which is obviously in a hook, meaning it uses a context. So for that, I have to mark this entire component as use client. And once I save, the error has gone away. Perfect. What I want to do now is import Zod. So there is a specific way we have to import Zod, which we are going to use to create our schemas and a bunch of validation in our forms. So import asterisk as z from Zod like this. Beautiful. And now what I want to do is I want to create a constants file where we are going to keep our form schema. So let's go ahead and inside this conversation folder, create a new file called constants.ts like that. And go ahead and write again, import asterisk as z from Zod. And export const form schema to be z.object, open an object inside, prompt, which is one of our default values, if you remember right here. So let's go ahead and give it a type. So it's going to be z.string. It's going to be required at least one character, and let's add a custom message if that is not true to be prompt is required like this. Beautiful. So just make sure you export const this form schema. And now we can go back in page tsx right here, and let's go ahead and let's actually import that from our constants. So I'm going to write import form schema from /constants. So no need to use the @ sign here because we are only going to use it inside of this folder. There we go. So now that we have that, we can actually define the types for this use form. So go ahead and just before the first parenthesis, open these curly brackets, these pointy brackets, and write z.infer like this. Go ahead and open pointy brackets one more time, type of form schema like this. And then besides default values, we can also add a resolver like this. And for the resolver, we are actually going to use Zod resolver like that, and we are going to pass in form schema. Now let's go ahead and import Zod resolver from another package that we got thanks to installing the form component from chat.cn UI. So go ahead and write import Zod resolver from @hookform/resolvers/Zod like this. So I just want to explain that this @ sign and this @ sign is just a coincidence. So this is the actual name of the package from npm, and this is just our alias to go to the root of our project. So don't confuse the two. You can see that there is a difference. So this one is exactly next to the name and our has a slash. So that's the difference. This is the actual name of the package and this is our own component. So I just want to explain that in case you're confused. Great. Now we have a Zod resolver, which is going to control the validation for this form right here. And now let's go ahead and just write two more things regarding the form that we are going to need before we start adding some elements here. So I want to extract the loading state. Usually in my past tutorials, I was using useState from React to control the loading state. But thanks to some of your comments, I figured out that useForm actually has its own loading state. So I'm going to write a constant is loading here to be form.formState.is submitting like this. And we're going to use that throughout this form. And let's write a simple const on submit form. It's going to be an asynchronous arrow function, which takes the prop of values like this, which is a type of z.infer type of form schema like that. And it's just a simple arrow function. And for now, all I'm going to do is console log the values like that because we have no API ready to send it to. Beautiful. So we have all of that now, and now we are ready to actually build our form. So let's go ahead and inside of this div, create a new div, and then you're going to add form component from @/components/UI form. So just make sure you've imported this like that. Now that you have your form component here, go ahead and pass in spread form like this. So we're going to pass in all of the functions this form constant has, which uses the React hook form. So that is instead of us passing all the props manually, we can just do this and it's much quicker. Now inside of that, go ahead and write the native HTML form element like this. And inside, go ahead and add an onSubmit prop, which is going to be form.handleSubmit. Go ahead and open parentheses, and then we're going to pass in this constant onSubmit that we've created above. There we go. And now let's go ahead and add some class names to this form. So class name is going to be rounded-lg border w-full p-4 px-3. On medium devices is going to be x-6, so a bit of a larger spacing on larger devices. Focus-within is going to be shadow-sm, grid, and grid-cols-12, and gap-2. And you should see a very small container visible inside like that. Nice. Now let's go ahead inside of this native for element and let's add a form field. So form field like this, and you can import that again from components UI form. Make sure you have it right here like that. And form field is going to be a self-closing tag. So let's go ahead and write a name for this field, which is going to be prompt. So it's going to control this value right here, and we have the validation for that value right here. Great, so this form field is going to control that value. And now let's give it a render prop like this. Go ahead and open parentheses, go ahead and immediately destructure field from that, and just open an arrow function, which is immediately going to render an element. And that element is going to be our form item, again from add/components UI form like this. Make sure you've imported form item from add/components UI form like that. Let's go ahead and give this a class name of call-span-12, so that's going to be for mobile devices, but on large is going to be call-span-10 like that. Inside of that form item, add a new component, form control, again from add/components UI form. Just check that it's imported right here. So I'm just going to collapse all of this so you can clearly see and don't have to skew to see it. Great, so we have the form control now, and this form control is going to have a class name of margin 0 and padding 0 like that. And inside we have to add another component called input, but our input does not come with our this add form CLI. So we have to add it manually by finding it here. Let's go ahead and let's find the input right here. There we go, and let's see how we can install it using npx chast latest add input. So I'm going to copy that as npm as well. I'm going to go inside of my terminal and I'm going to run that command right here. I'm going to press yes, and I'm going to run the project again. And of course, I'm going to refresh to make sure everything is running smoothly. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's add the input from our add/components UI input, which is a self-closing tag. So there we go. So import input from add/components UI input. I'm just going to move it alongside all of my components right here. Beautiful. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's give this input some class names. So I'm going to write a class name, border-0, outline-none, focus-visible, ring-0, focus-visible, ring-transparent, like this. Because I want it to be a specially styled input, I want it to look like the whole container is an input. So it's just a bit of my style preference. If you want to, you can completely remove these class names, but then the input is clearly visible and I kind of don't like it. So that's why I added these class names, because I just think it looks cooler, like it's a magic input inside of this box. Great, and now that we have that input, I'm gonna add a disabled prop to it, and disabled is going to be activated when we are loading the form. So we're gonna use this constant that we defined right here. So just pass it inside like that. Nice. And for the rest, let's give it a placeholder, which is going to be you can write whatever you want here, but I want to give it a prompt so that the user knows what to ask this AI model. For example, how do I calculate the radius of a circle, for example. So that's going to be one of the prompts that the user can write inside. And let's go ahead and let's spread field inside, which we've destructured right here in the form field. So what is this spreading of the field doing? Well, if you play around and go through these types right here, you can see that that field has onChange, onBlur, value, name, and ref. So what we've done essentially is replaced manually writing onChange, manually writing onBlur, manually writing value, and all of that stuff by simply spreading field, and we are trusting chat-cn and React hook form that is gonna handle it as it should. Beautiful. So very, very simple. And now let's go ahead and just outside of this form control, outside of the form item, and outside of the entire form field actually, but still inside of the native HTML form element, add a new component button from add/components UI button like this. So make sure you've imported that here. I'm going to move it alongside all of my imports, and let's go ahead and just write generate like this. But we have to give it some styles. So I'm going to go ahead and write class name here, call-span-12 on mobile devices, and LG is going to be call-span-2 like that. So right now it's not on large, so it's collapsed, but if I expand a bit, you can see how it looks. So depending on whether you are on a bit of a smaller device, I decided to collapse it because it just looks better. And so yeah, we kind of share the same design for our mobile and for our medium screens. If you want, you can change this LG and LG here to medium, but in my experience, it looks better like this, because there is a chance that some of our models, like image generation, are not only going to have an input and a button, we're also going to have some select options. So that's why it's better to just collapse everything like this immediately on the medium and not only on large. Great. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and let's also give it a W-full property just in case, because we're gonna need it later. Let's go ahead and let's give it a disabled prop of is loading as well. Beautiful. So now we have that done. And that pretty much finishes our form. So what we have to do next is actually create the Axios call. The Axios call that is going to generate something here. But before we do that, let's go ahead and let's actually prepare for what's next. So outside of this form with the capital F, and outside of this div right here, go ahead and create a new div with the class name space-y-4 and margin top 4. And for now, all I'm going to write is messages content. Right, so this is where we are going to render our messages once we actually have something to load. Beautiful, great job so far. Now it's time for us to add an API route which is going to connect to OpenAI and actually make this site functional. So in order to do that, what you have to do is go ahead and create an account for OpenAI. So either go to openai.com or Google OpenAI. Find the menu and click on login or sign up depending on whether you have an account or not. So I already have an account, so I'm going to use my Google email right here, and then I am prompted with these three options. Go ahead and click on API like this, and you should see an API platform just like this. If this is your first ever time using OpenAI, that means, so if you had to register for this, that means you have a free tier and you don't need to add your credit card to use this. And you can check that very quickly by clicking on personal at the top, click on manage account and click on usage right here. So you can see that I don't have a free tier, so I had to pay because during the development of this tutorial, I intensively used OpenAI. But you can see that even during my 3 weeks of using OpenAI and rigorous testing, I barely spent $5. So it's not that expensive, even if you end up having to add your credit card. But if this is your first time creating this account, you're probably going to see an entire bar grayed out, and it's probably going to say 0 out of $5. That means that you have $5 for free that you can use without adding your credit card. But you have to use it within the first 3 months. If you wait longer than that, it's going to be expired. And then you're going to see a red line for this usage right here. So what happens if you, during this tutorial, you end up needing more credits? Well, you go ahead and click on billing right here and add a payment method. And after you do that, go ahead and click on usage limits and make sure that you add a hard limit and a soft limit. So this is not going to allow you to spend more money than what you enter here. So right now I'm ready to spend $10 and I'm going to click save, and you can see in my usage I'm not able to spend more than $10. So they do have security measures in place for you to not overspend. But again, if this is your first time creating this account, you most certainly have a free tier and you don't need to add a credit card. So let's go ahead. I'm going to zoom out a bit. And now I want you to click on personal again and click on view API keys. And in here, I already have one secret key, which I used for initial project. And go ahead and click on create new secret key. And I'm going to name this tutorial video. It doesn't matter what you name it. But what does matter is that you copy this secret immediately and don't close the model just yet. Instead, go into your environment file like this and add OpenAI underscore API underscore key and paste that key right here. If you accidentally did close this model, don't worry, just click create new secret key again. Perfect. So now that we have this, that is actually it. We no longer need OpenAI at all, and we can go back inside of our application. And now it's time for us to create an API route. So go ahead, go into the app folder right here. And one more thing before we continue. So what I want you to do is I want you to add your .environment file to gitignore. That's very important. So go ahead in your gitignore file and just add under this .environment.local, just add .environment as well. And then your .environment file is not going to be committed to GitHub. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's go inside of our app folder. Let's go and create a new folder called API. And inside, create a new folder called conversation like that. And inside, go ahead and create a new file called route.ts like that. And now we have to install a package for OpenAI. So go ahead in your terminal. I'm going to close the app and write npm install OpenAI like this. And after that, I'm going to run the project again and refresh my page. Now, let's go ahead and add the configuration for OpenAI. So import configuration and OpenAI API from OpenAI like this. Now write constant configuration like that, new configuration, and the objects are API key, which is process.environment, and it has to be this one in your OpenAI key like this. And now just write const OpenAI to be new OpenAI API and pass in the configuration. And now we can go ahead and write the post route. So export asynchronous function post like this, which is going to accept a request, which is a type of request. And go ahead and open a try and catch block like this. So let's resolve the error first. I'm going to console log. I'm going to add a string saying conversation underscore error. And I'm going to log that error. So this is going to help us in development. And then just return new next response, which you can import from next/server. And just go ahead and write internal error and just pass in the status of 500 like that. Now in try, let's go ahead and check if we are authenticated. So const user ID from auth, and you can import out from @clerk/next.js like that. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and let's destructure the body. So const body is equal to await request.json like that. And const messages are equal to body like this. Now let's check for authentication. So if there is no user ID, in that case, we're going to return new next response unauthorized and pass in the status of 401 like that. After that, go ahead and write if there is no configuration.api key, return new next response OpenAI API key not configured, which is a status of 500 like that. Now let's go ahead and check if we haven't passed the messages to this route. So if there is no messages, in that case, return new next response. Messages are required like that with a status of 400. Like that. And now just write const response. And now we're going to use the OpenAI model. So we're going to write await OpenAI.create chat completion. We're going to choose the model. The model we're going to use is GPT-3.5-turbo. Like that. And we're going to pass in the messages model like that. And all we have to do in the end is return next response.json response.data.choices first in the array dot message like that. Beautiful. So you finished an entire connection to OpenAI and you checked for authentication. Beautiful. And now we are ready to go back inside the page of our conversation and actually make that request. So let's go ahead and let's go back inside of our dashboard, routes, conversation, page.tsx right here. And first, what I want to do is I want to install a package called Axios. So let's go ahead in our terminal and write npm install Axios like this and run the project again and refresh it if you've shut it down. And I'm just going to import that at the top. So import Axios from Axios like that, because of course we are going to use it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a try and catch block on this and submit. So try and catch like this. Error is a type of any, like that. And for now, let's just log this error right here. And then finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh the router. So all of our server components are going to update. This is going to be useful in the future, and I'm going to explain why when we get to that part. So go ahead and add const router to be use router from next/navigation. So make sure it's next/navigation and not next/router. And I'm just going to add it to the top like this. And just make sure you have the router right here. And then finally, you can use router.refresh like that. Perfect. Now what we want to do in our try block is we want to do some modifications with the local messages, and we want to create a post request to the new API route that we just created. So let's go ahead first and let's create a state for our messages. So I'm going to go ahead and just below the router write const messages set messages like this to be use state, which you can import from React, and go ahead and give it an empty array like this. But I immediately want to give a type to this use state, which is going to be chat completion request message, and it's going to be an array. And you can import this from OpenAI. So go ahead and import from OpenAI like this. So chat completion request message in the use state, and make sure you put an array at the end of this type, otherwise it's not going to work. So this is how it looks in one line. Use state chat completion request message, make sure it's an array, otherwise it's not going to work, and then an empty array inside. Perfect. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and actually start assigning some messages here. So what I'm going to write is const user message to be a type of chat completion request message again. It's going to be an object, which is going to have a role, which is going to be user, and content is going to be values.prompt. So it's going to be whatever we have written in this input right here. That's going to be the user message. That's what we are sending. And then we're going to add and create an array of new messages. So const new messages is going to be an array, which is going to use all the existing messages, which right now are empty. But think of it that we are going to have many messages in this chat. So we have to use all the existing message and add the new user message like that. And now let's go ahead and let's create an API call for this. So const response is equal to await Axios, which we have imported right here. So Axios.post /API/conversation. That is because in our app folder, we have created a new folder called API conversation route TS. So that results to /API/conversation. And go ahead and pass in an object messages to be new messages like that. Perfect. And now that we have our response, you're going to use set messages. It's going to take the current message value like this, open an array, spread the current, add the user message, and add response.data like that. And make sure you do form.reset at the end so the input is cleared. Perfect. And I just want to do a comment inside of this catch function. So I'm going to add to do open pro model like this. So this is going to help us later when we add subscriptions, that if we get a specific error, we're going to have to know that we have to trigger a premium model There we go. And what we can do now is we can actually modify this messages content right here to display our messages. So let's go ahead inside and let's create a new div instead of this messages content. So div class name flex dash call dash reverse gap dash y dash 4. And inside, what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over messages. So messages.map, take the individual message, and we're going to immediately return a div which is going to render message.content like this, and the key is going to be message dot, well, whatever we want. Let's give it content as well, like this. So let's see if this works right now. It's going to be very simple right now, but I'm going to open my network tab so I can see if everything is working correctly and if we are getting any errors. For example, what is the radius of the sun? And I'm going to click generate, and you can see that we fired up an event on conversation. And look at this, we have an answer. So this is our question and this is the answer. The radius of the sun is approximately, well, this many kilometers. Beautiful. So our OpenAI model is officially working. Amazing, amazing job. Look at this. All that's left is to style this and to add some loading states and some empty states. So let's go ahead and let's refresh, and let's add the empty state first. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to expand this like this, and I'm going to go inside of this div space y for empty for like this. And just above this div, which is rendering our messages, what I'm going to write is a condition which is going to check if there are no messages in here. So I'm going to write messages.length is equal to 0. And if we are not loading, so if it's not loading, and in that case, go ahead and render a div which is going to say empty like this. Let's see if that works. It works right here. So the messages are empty and we are not loading, meaning that it's going to display empty. But instead of rendering empty, what I actually want to render is a component called empty like this. So go ahead and save this, and of course we get an error because we don't have that component. So let's go ahead, let's go in our components and create a new file empty.tsx like this. I'm going to go ahead and quickly create an empty component, but I'm not going to do export default. I'm just going to do export const empty like this. And inside, I'm going to create a div saying empty component like that. And then we can go back inside of this page and import that component from add/components empty. So just make sure you have imported it right here, and you destructured the import because we did an export const. And if you save, there we go. Now it says empty component. Perfect. And I just want to move this React import all the way to the top like this. There we go. Let's go back inside of our empty.tsx and let's add an interface for it. So interface empty props. Label is string like that. Let's go ahead and structure the label. And let's give it the props, empty props, like that. Now, let's remove this and let's give this a class name of h-full, p-20, flex-call, items-center, and justify-center, like that. Inside, I'm going to go ahead and open another div with a class name of relative, h-72, and w-72 as well. And inside, I'm going to render an image component from next/image. So make sure that you give it an alt of empty, a fill property, and a source of /empty.png like that. And if you refresh, of course, we have a broken image because this image does not exist in our project. So obviously we have to add something to our public folder right here. So if you want to, you can find any image you like, or you can go inside of my repository right here and go into the public folder and find the image called empty.png, right click, save the image, and drag and drop that into the public folder and make sure it's named empty.png. And now if I refresh right here, there we go. You can see that I have a nice looking empty state now. One more thing we have to add to this empty component is to render the actual label. So go outside of the div rendering the image and add a paragraph label like that. And let's just go ahead and add a class name, text-muted-foreground, text-sm, and text-center. Now nothing is rendering. That is because in our app folder dashboard routes conversation page, we did not add a label to this component. So go ahead and add a label here, and we're gonna say no conversation started, like this. There we go. Now you can see how nicely this looks. Perfect. Now I want to create another component, and that is for the loading state. So I'm going to go ahead and create another conditional above this messages saying is loading and I'm going to open parentheses. I'm going to open a div with a class name p-8 rounded-lg w-full flex items-center justify-center and bg-muted, like this. And inside I'm going to render the loader component. And of course we're going to get an error if we refresh because loader does not exist. I'm not getting an error, probably because this is not the loading state right now. But let's go ahead and let's create that component. So components loader.tsx. Go ahead and write export const loader like this and return a div saying loading, like that. Go back into page and import the loader from @/components/loader, so the same way you did with empty, like this. And now you should have no errors at all. Let's go back inside of this loader component and let's add some class names to this div. So class name is going to be h-full flex-call gap-y-4 items-center justify-center, like that. And inside open a div with a class name w-10 h-10 relative and animate-spin, like that. And inside we're going to use an image from next/image, give it an alt of logo, give it a property fill, and give it a property source to be logo.png, like that. And below this div, which is wrapping our image, add a paragraph saying genius is thinking and 3 dots, and give it a class name of text-sm text-muted-foreground, like this. Perfect. And now let's go inside of our page.tsx and let's manually trigger the loading. So I'm going to change this. I'm just going to change this is loading to true. So you can see how this looks. There we go. You can see how our loader is now looking. So just make sure that you have this exact code if it's not looking like this for you. Beautiful. And just bring this back to is loading, like that. Nice. And now what we have to do is we have to find a way to render these messages in a nicer way. So let's go ahead and let's change this. So I'm gonna keep the key here like that, but I'm just gonna collapse it because we're gonna have some more stuff here. And inside, go ahead and write class name. It's gonna be dynamic, and we're going to use cn from @libsutils. So make sure you import cn from @libutils, like this. Open parentheses inside, and our first class, the default class, is going to be p-8 w-full flex items-start gap-x-8 and rounded-lg, like that. And then our dynamic class name is going to be different depending on whether this is our message or the message from the AI. So message.role is identical to user. In that case, we're going to use bg-white border and border-black/10, like this. Else, we're going to use bg-muted, like that. There we go. And now what I want to do is I want to create 2 more components, user avatar and bot avatar components. So let's go ahead and let's go inside of our components again and create a new file called user-avatar.tsx. I'm going to go ahead and write export const user avatar, like this. And I'm going to extract the user from user using clerk, like this. And I'm going to return. And now we have to add the avatar component from chat-cn. So let's go to chat-cn right here. Let's go inside of components and let's find the avatar component right here. So this is the one we want. Let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to go inside of my terminal. And this is the command we're going to use. npx chat-cn-ui @latest add avatar, like that. Go ahead and confirm the installation. And once it's done, run the project again. Make sure you refresh your application. And now you can freely add avatar from ./UI avatar or from /components avatar. So I like to use it in this way. There we go. Go ahead and give this a class name of h-8 and w-8. Go ahead and add an avatar image, also imported from /components or ./UI avatar like this. And the source is going to be user !profile image URL like that. Below that, use the avatar fallback. So if an image isn't able to load, so I'm just going to destructure this like this, so you can see all the components we need. We're going to use the avatar fallback in case the image wasn't able to load. So I'm going to write user first name char at 0, and I'm going to repeat that for the last name like this. So in case my image can't load, I'm just going to use my first letter of my first name and first letter of my last name, because that's the most common way of fallback. Perfect. And now that we have that, let's also create a bot avatar. So go ahead and create a new component called bot-avatar.tsx, export const bot avatar like this. It's going to be much simpler. So just return avatar from UI avatar or components avatar, like I prefer it like this. Let's go ahead and give this a class name of h-8 and w-8 and avatar image from components UI avatar like that. Give it a class name of p-1 and the source of /logo.png. So we already have that image because it's in our sidebar and in our loading component. Perfect. So we have those two now, and we can now focus on building the messages design here. So what I want to do besides rendering the message content and this div which we created right here is decide whether to render the user avatar or bot avatar. So besides above the message content, I'm going to write message.role is user. In that case, we're going to render user avatar from /components user avatar. So make sure you've imported that, and otherwise I'm going to render the bot avatar like this. Perfect. So I'm going to expand this so you can see it in one line. So make sure you have user avatar and bot avatar imported like this. Let's go to the bottom, and one more thing we have to do is I want to wrap this message content inside a paragraph like this and give this paragraph a class name of text-sm like that. And let's see how our messages look now. So I'm going to go ahead and say, what is the radius of the Earth, for example? And there we go. Genius is thinking. And you can see that you saw how for a second it used the fallback and then it loaded my image. And here we have the answer. Absolutely amazing. You have your first ever working AI model. You can ask it whatever you want. For example, what are the best technologies to build a web app in 2020, for example? And Genius is now thinking and it's going to give us an answer in a couple of seconds. Let's see what it's going to come up with. There we go. Look at this. So it tells us exactly what are the newest libraries and everything. Great job. You successfully finished the conversation model. It's available on mobile. It's available on desktop. It's fully styled and you're using OpenAI. Beautiful, amazing job. The next AI model I want to create is code generation, because it's very similar to this conversation that we have right now, and it also uses OpenAI. So let's go ahead and I'm going to close everything. I'm going to go into the app folder, dashboard routes, and I'm going to copy the conversation and I'm going to paste it inside routes. So now you're going to have conversation and conversation copy like this. Let me just expand this. There we go. And rename the conversation copy to code like that. So now if you click on code generation or go to /code, you're going to see the exact same thing as conversation. So let's slowly go ahead and change it so that it fits our design for code. First, I want to change the const conversation page and the export default to be code page instead of conversation page. So I'm going to select the two and write code page like that. Perfect. So nothing should change right now, but we are writing proper code inside. Most of the stuff can actually stay the same in here. But one thing we're going to change, of course, is the API and the design. So let's start with the design first, because I think it's much simpler to do that. Okay, so inside of this heading, let's change this to code generation, like this. Make sure you are on /code, like this. Make sure you're not accidentally editing the conversation. So this should stay the same, but code generation should now say code generation on API, sorry, on /code, like this. And the description is going to be generate code using descriptive text, like that. And the icon is going to be code from Lucid React. So now let's go ahead and let's just remove the message square import because we don't need that now. Great, so we have that now, and now let's change the colors. So instead of violet, it's going to be green, and instead of 500, it's going to be 700, like that. Perfect. So now it matches what we have on our dashboard right here, and I can also click here and it should lead me to the exact same route. If it's not, make sure to check the tools constant inside dashboard and make sure that the href is correct. It should be /code, the same as in the sidebar. Beautiful. So we now have that. Let's go ahead and let's change the placeholder of the input. Instead of asking us how do I calculate the radius of a circle, let's give this a more descriptive prompt to what the user could actually type in here. We're gonna go ahead and write simple toggle button using React hooks, like this. So that's something more realistic to what the user would write in code generation AI model. Beautiful. So now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to edit the API. So instead of going to /API/conversation in the onSubmit function inside, of course, the code page, we're going to change it to /code, like this. This, of course, right now does not exist. So let's go ahead and let's create that. We're going to go inside the app folder, inside API. We're going to copy the conversation, paste it, rename the new one to code, like this. And inside route.ts, let's go ahead and let's see what we have to change to make our code generation works. So what I want to do first is I want to add a default message to this model so it knows how to behave. So I don't want it to be a general AI assistant. Right now, it's just an assistant, right? Because it has no messages in the beginning. So we are going to add a default message to tell it how to behave in this model. So let's go ahead and write const instruction message, which is a type of chat completion request message, and let's import that from OpenAI like this. It's going to be an object which has a role of system, like that, and content is going to be, well, you can play around with this, you can test what works best, but I'm using this prompt because it works for me. This is not set in stone. You're gonna see what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna tell it what to do. So you are a code generator, like that. You must answer only in markdown code snippets. Use code comments for explanations, like that. So that is going to be the first message that this model is going to have. So now let's copy this instruction message. Let's go inside of the response right here. And let's modify these messages to always take the instruction message first and then the rest of the messages, like that. Everything else can stay the same except this error. I'm gonna write code error so it's easier for us to find that in the terminal if something goes wrong. So let's go ahead and let's test this. So I'm gonna refresh this and I'm gonna ask it one question first. What is your purpose, for example? I think it's probably going to be different for you. So we're working with AI here, but there we go. It should say something in this line, my purpose as a code generator. So that's why the reason it's saying this is because we gave it an instruction message first. So it knows that it is a code generator. Of course, yours is probably not going to give the exact same answer, but it should be something to indicate that it should generate code. Whereas if you go to conversation, of course, and ask, what is your purpose? I don't think it should mention code generation at all. See, it's an AI developed by OpenAI and its purpose is to assist and provide helpful information. But code generation is he obviously knows that it is a code generator. Beautiful. So one thing I want to test now is simple toggle button using React hooks. Let's see what it's going to come up with. It is definitely going to give us some code, but it's not going to be formatted in the way we want to. What I want to do is I want to have a nice markdown. See, this is very hard to read, like almost impossible. So let's go ahead and let's go inside the page of code generation. So app dashboard routes code page.tsx right here. So as I said, everything else can stay exactly the same. But one thing that I want to change is that I don't want to just render the message content like this. Instead, I want to render it in React Markdown. So let's go ahead in our terminal and let's install a package called npm install react-markdown like that. And after that has been installed, you can go ahead and npm run dev your project again and make sure to refresh. Perfect. Now let's import that. So I'm going to import React Markdown from React-Markdown like that. Perfect. And now I'm going to go and find my message.content and I'm going to modify it. So let's go ahead and let's remove this for now. And instead, I'm going to write React Markdown like this. And inside, just go ahead and render message.content pipe empty array like this. And let's see if that has improved anything. So simple toggle button using React hooks. Let's see if that has changed how our code looks now. There we go. Okay, so we're getting somewhere, but obviously it's still not perfect. But it's at least structured to some way. So let's see how we can improve it. I'm gonna go back to React Markdown here, and let's see if we can give it some class names, some components, anything to make it look a bit better. And I suggest that you don't refresh this so you can see the active changes while you're developing. Let's go ahead and give it a prop components, and inside open another object. First component I want to edit is the pre-tag, because that's what it's using to render out code. So we're going to edit that element to the way we like it. So go ahead and open an arrow function and immediately destructure node and the rest of the props like this. Go ahead and open an arrow function and render a div inside. So div like this. Give it a class name of overflow-auto w-full margin top and bottom to 2 bg-black/10 p-2 and rounded-lg. And inside, render the pre-tag and spread the props, and it is a self-closing tag like this. There we go. Now it looks a little bit better. Let's see if we can improve it even more. I'm going to go ahead and edit another element inside called code. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to destructure node, and I'm going to spread the props, and I'm going to return the code element, which is a self-closing tag. I'm going to give it a class name of bg-black/10 rounded-lg and padding of 1. And don't forget, you have to spread the props inside like this. So I'm just going to expand this so you can see. There we go. So you can see how now even our little codes snippets have a specific color. Beautiful. I'm just going to collapse this so you can see better. And now what I want to do is I want to add, so outside of this components prop, to the React Markdown component, add a new prop class name. And in here, let's give it a text-sm overflow-hidden and leading-7 like this. There we go. Now it looks much better. Perfect. Look at this. Absolutely amazing. Let's ask it something else. For example, a model using React hooks and tailwind like this. Let's see what it's going to come up with and how it's going to look like. There we go. Look at this. I think this is absolutely amazing. You can see how we have an overflow in our code snippet, but we can scroll that without affecting the rest of the website. I think this is really cool and looks really nice. The AI knows its purpose and it can generate nice looking code in nice markdown. Beautiful job. You just finished code generation as well as conversation. So now we're gonna get and do image generation, because that is the last model which is going to use OpenAI. The rest of our models are going to use Replicate AI. So that's what I wanted to go in this direction because it's easier for us to code. So next one is gonna be image generation. That's gonna be a bit different. Let's create our image generation AI page. So what I want to do is I'm going to expand this. I'm going to close everything, and the same thing I did for code generation. So I'm going to go and find the conversation. I'm going to copy it and paste it inside routes. And I'm going to rename this one to image like that. And now if you go and click on image generation, you should see conversation, but not a 404. And same thing if you go from the dashboard like this. So now let's go ahead and slowly modify this so it looks like an actual image generator. So first, let's rename the conversation page constant and the export to image page like this. And nothing should change yet. We are not going to work with messages and we're going to have to change the default values, but we're going to do that later. First, I just want to change the design so it looks like an image generator. So the title in our heading should be image generation, like that. Beautiful. The description should be turn your prompt into an image, like that. The icon should be image icon from Lucid React. So make sure you import that and remove the message square because we no longer need that. The colors should be pink like this, and it should be of 700 value like that. So it fits exactly what we used in the sidebar. Beautiful. So you can see how it looks exactly the same here. And now what I want to do is I want to change the constant for my form schema before I start doing anything else here. So let's go ahead and let's go inside of our constants. So inside of this folder which we copied, we also copied the constants file. So inside, what I want to do is I want to change the form schema to change the message prompt. Instead of prompt is required, let's change this to image prompt is required. And let's also add an amount, which is going to be z.string with a minimum value of 1, and resolution, which is also z.string and a minimum value of 1, like that. And now let's create constants for options. So this image generation is going to have two options available. You'll be able to select the number of images you want to generate as well as the resolution. So we have to create that in our, we just did that in our form schema. But now I want to create an array of options that users will be able to choose from. So let's go ahead and let's write export const amount options like this. It's going to be an array of objects. Value for the first one is going to be 1 and label is going to be 1 photo like that. Let's go ahead and let's copy that, and don't forget to add a comma. And the second one is going to be 2, and of course photos like that. And we're going to copy that a couple of more times until we reach 5. So let me just remove the extra comma. Let's change this to 5 like that. There are of course smarter ways to do this, but sometimes simple is better. So I just changed this to 5. I don't know why. I meant on 3, and here I meant on 4. And the last one is going to be 5. Like that. So just modify this to 5 photos. And the same way we did this, I now want to do our resolution options. So let's go ahead and write export const resolution options like that. First object inside is going to have a value of 256 times 256, and it's going to have the very same label. Go ahead and copy this. And the second one is going to have a value not of 256, but of 512. And the last one is going to have 2024, so 2024 like this. There we go. So we just created an options that users will be able to choose from when creating their images. And now we can go back inside of our image page right here, and let's slowly start modifying things. So first thing I want to remove is this images, is the messages. We're not going to have that here. And we can also actually remove the chat completion request message from OpenAI. We are not going to need that. Great. I'm going to modify this on submit right here. So I'm going to replace this. I'm just going to leave the response right here. And for now, let's go ahead and just do this. For the set messages, I'm also going to remove it like this. Great. So just make sure that your on submit function is now much simpler. And of course, we're going to change this to /image, but let's leave it to /conversation for now, so we don't change too many things at once and get confused. So our onSubmit is now calling the response and resetting the form. That's it. Now we have some errors at the bottom. And that is, of course, because of it's looking for the message state, but we just removed it, so it doesn't exist. We're going to fix that very simply. So we're not going to remove this. But what I do want to remove is this. I'm going to remove this entire div iterating over our messages. So select this, remove it, create a new div, and just write images will be rendered here like that. And of course, we still have the error because messages is not defined. Instead of messages, we're going to use images. So let's go ahead and let's create a constant images, set images like this, use state, and an empty array inside. And the type of this state is going to be an array of strings like this. So now we have the images to work with. So now let's go back here and let's change this to be images.length like that. And let's immediately change this to no images generated like that. There we go. I also want to modify the loader just a little bit. So I'm going to remove this huge class name we have for the container holding the loader, and I'm going to replace it with just p-20 like that. So let's check how that looks like. There we go. That looks fine. Now let's go ahead and let's change our form schema right here. Sorry, not the form schema, but the default values in our use form hook right here. So instead of just having a prompt, it's also going to have a mount, and its mount is going to be by default just one image. And resolution, well, you can choose what you want, but I'm going to choose 512 like this. Beautiful. And now that we have that, we can go ahead and actually modify our onSubmit function here. So what I want to do first is I want to reset all the photos every time we click submit. So const set images empty array like that. Actually not const, just set images. My apologies. Great. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get this response, but not from /API/conversation. Instead, we're going to get it from /API/image. And the body we are going to pass inside is going to be values. So we don't have to modify values in any way. It's fine the way it's passed from the onSubmit prop right here. In our conversation page, we had to modify the values to create a specific message object which fits the OpenAI schema. But this is going to be just fine because we're going to modify it on the server because the structure is simply that way that we can do that. Great. And we're going to prepare the way our response is going to work. So I'm going to write const urls response.data.map. We're going to get the individual image, which is going to be a type of object, which has URL inside, and that is a type of string. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to extract image.url from that specific image we are iterating over. So we are creating an array going through this response.data, and we're just going to return the URL string. That is because our set images state expects an array of strings. So we extract the URL from each individual image in the array that we are going to get from the Axios, and we set it in that state. Actually, we don't yet set it, we just created the URLs. So just after the form reset, before form reset, let's do set images URLs like that. Great. So now that we have that, we can actually go ahead and create our image route. My apologies, we cannot do that yet. What we actually have to do is we have to add the options to select our fields right here. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and find your form. And let's first change the placeholder here. So instead of asking how to calculate the radius of a circle, let's ask a picture of a horse in Swiss Alps, like this. So that's a more realistic prompt that the user would ask. Great. And now let's go ahead and let's create another form field that is going to be besides this input. So form field again, which is a self-closing tag. Let's go ahead and give it a name of amount. And let's give it a property control to be form.control. So this one is going to be a little bit different because this time it's going to be a select input. So that's why I'm adding control separately. Now let's add the render field. Go ahead and extract field in this arrow function and return form item component, which we already have. Let's go ahead and give it a class name of whole-span-12 And on LG, it's going to be col-span-2, like that. Great. Inside of that, let's go ahead and add the select component. The problem is we don't have it. So go in chast and UI, of course, and find the select component. And it's right here. There we go. And now let's find the CLI command. So npx chast-ui latest add select. I'm going to copy the npm. I'm going to go inside of my terminal like this, and I'm going to pass the command. So npx chast-ui add latest add select. And I'm going to confirm the installation. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and run my project again. So just write npm run dev again and refresh your application. There we go. And now we can safely add the select component inside. So I'm going to add select like this from add/components UI select. So let's see how that looks like. So I've added it right here. Select from add/components UI select. So let's move this. Well, you can keep it here, but just make sure it's alongside this imports. And yeah, you can remove the user avatar and the bot avatar. We don't need that. And I'm pretty sure we are going to need CN. I'm going to leave it just in case. Great. Now let's go ahead and let's continue developing this select component right here. So let's give it some attributes. It's going to have a prop disabled to be triggered when we are loading, like that. On value change is going to be field.onChange. Value is going to be field value, and default value is going to be field.value as well, like that. Now let's add the form control. Form control like this. It's not going to have any attributes at all. Now let's add the select trigger component from add/components UI select. So make sure you have imported select trigger and select from components UI select. Inside of select trigger, go ahead and add select value. Another component you're going to import from add/components UI select. So make sure you have that as well. Great. And this is actually going to be a self-closing tag like this, and just give it a default value of field.value like that. Outside of our form control, let's go ahead and let's add select content from add/components UI select. And inside, let's iterate over our amount options. So amount options from constants. So I've imported select content from components UI select as well. Let me just structure this like this so you can see. And I have imported amount options from the same place I'm importing form schema ./constants. So make sure you import that as well. And then go ahead and map over those like this. Pick the individual option like that, and immediately return select item. Another item you're going to import from components UI select. Beautiful. Now let's go ahead and let's give it a key value of option.value, and let's give it a value of option.value as well. And inside, we're going to render option.label like that. There we go. You can see how now we have a prompt to select how many photos we want to generate. Beautiful. And let's see how that looks like on desktop. I think we made a mistake here. And yes, so we have to change the grid for our button and for our input. So let's go ahead and play a little bit with that to see what we have to change exactly. So let's find the prompt first. So this is our prompt, form field with the name prompt. Currently on large devices, it uses col-span 10, and that is way too much because we're going to have two selects beside it, and we want them all to be in the same line. So we have to reduce this from 10 to 6 on large devices. So I think just even now, if I collapse, there we go. Looks much better, but still something is a little bit weird. But let's continue developing, and let's add another select option here. This time it's going to be for resolution options. So you can go ahead and copy this entire form field for name amount. So all the way to the end of the self-closing tag. Go ahead and paste it like this and save it. And just rename this to resolution like that. And let's go ahead and change these amount options to resolution options. And make sure you have imported resolution options from ./constants like this. So I'm gonna collapse all of those and save. And I'm gonna refresh here, and there we go. Now it looks much better on mobile and on desktop. You can select your resolution and you can select the amount of photos you want. Beautiful. Let's see if we have to change anything in the button or if it looks fine. So let's see. Our button is taking an LG call span of 2, and I think that is fine. Yes, that can stay exactly the same. And let's just test if this works. So I'm going to comment this out for now, and I'm going to comment actually everything besides set images. You don't have to do this, but I just want to console log my values to see what we're actually getting. So I'm going to expand this right here. I'm going to open my tab. I'm going to write a horse in Swiss Alps. I'm going to select 2 photos and 512. And there we go. We have a prompt, we have an amount and resolution. Everything seems to be correct. Let's change it. There we go. So this is what we will be sending to the server, and OpenAI knows how to work with that. Beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to undo these changes right here. And now it's time for us to create an API for our image generator. Let's go inside of our app folder again. Find the API folder, and let's just copy the conversation and rename it to image like this. Go inside that route right here, and let's see what we have to modify. So user ID is fine, body is fine, but what we are destructuring from the body is not correct. Instead of messages, we are going to need a prompt. We're going to give an amount, and let's give it a default value of 1. We're also going to need a resolution, and let's give that a default value of 512 times 512, like that. Now, instead of checking if we have the messages, let's check if we have a prompt like this and say prompt is required, like that. And let's copy this 2 more times. 1 for amount and say amount is required, and 1 for resolution and say resolution is required. And now, instead of using create chat completion, what we're going to do is we're going to use OpenAI.createImage like this. This one does not accept model or messages. Instead, it accepts a prompt. You can write it either like this or use a shorthand like this. A number, which we have to parse. So parse integer amount with a radix of 10 like this. And size is a resolution like this. There we go. And the response is now different. So we have to modify it. So instead of using response.data.choices0.message, go ahead and return the entire data. So response.data.data, and change the conversation error to image error like this. Beautiful. Now let's go back inside page.tsx and let's see if we can find a way to simply render our images already. So I'm going to go ahead and let's give this div a class name of grid again -calls-1. That's going to be on mobile. On medium, we're going to use grid-calls-2. On large, we're going to use grid-calls-3. On extra large, we're going to use grid-calls-4 and give it a gap 4 and margin top 8 like that. Now let's go ahead and let's write images.map source and immediately return a card, which we already added in chast. So make sure you import card from components UI card like this. Let's go ahead and give it some properties. So it's going to have a key, which is source, and it's going to have a class name, which is going to be rounded-lg and overflow-hidden. Inside card, create a div with a class name of relative and aspect-square. Inside of that, create an image from next/image. So make sure you have imported image from next/image like I did right here, and I'm just going to move it to the top here. So image from next/image. Let's go all the way down back to where we added an image. It is a self-closing tag. Let's go ahead and give it an alt property of image, a fill property, and source, which is going to be source like this. Beautiful. And inside the card, let's also add card footer, something you will also going to import from add/components UI card. Inside of this card footer, go ahead and give it a class name of p-2, and inside add a button which we already have imported. So just make sure you have it imported, but you should have it because we already use a button in this page, like this. And give this button a variant of secondary and a class name of w-full, like this. And inside, I'm going to render download icon from Lucid React. So make sure you have imported download and image icon from Lucid React, like this. Let's go ahead and let's give it a class name of h-4, w-4, and margin right 2, like this. And let's write a text download, like this. And I'm going to collapse these attributes in this button because I want to add another one, like this. And let's add onClick to be an arrow function window.open source, like that. Let's see if this is enough for us to render our images. I'm going to go and expand this. I'm going to refresh the entire page. I'm going to write a picture of a horse in Swiss Alps. I'm going to say to select 4 photos in the lowest resolution, and let's see if that's going to throw some errors or if we did everything correctly. After a couple of seconds, I'm pretty confident. Yes, it actually works, but what's going on? Why are we having this error? Well, what's going on is that you cannot just load any image you want from in Next.js using next image. What we have to do is we have to add this host name, so this exact host name inside of our configuration. So go ahead and copy this host name right here. So you're gonna get this error, invalid source prop for this specific image on the next/image, which is the component we're using. And it says exactly what is the host name that we have to add inside of our next config, and it also gives you instructions on how to do that. So let's go ahead and let's copy this host name. It's a very long host name, like this. And let's find our config. So I'm going to close everything and find next.config.js, like this. Open this object and write images, domains, an array, and paste it inside, like this. And what I recommend actually doing is shutting down and restarting your application. So npm run dev again. I'm going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to refresh. And once this page loads, we're going to try our prompt again. Let's try one more time. A picture of a horse in Swiss Alps, 4 photos,